Things you own end up owning you.
What's going on, cutie pies? Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is Hans Amato. Hans is the founder of his company Men Elite, where he coaches men on how to improve their health and optimize their well-being. Hans is based in South Africa, so we recorded this podcast quite early on LA time. So pardon me if I sound a little stupid for chewing up my words and stuttering here and there. Hans and I talk about how he got into fitness. We bro out a little bit about Vince Gironda and his work. We talk about how Hans discovered the writings of Ray Peat. We talk supplements, his thoughts on weight training, and just what his overall approach is to help clients improve their health. Hans is a very nice guy to chat with, and I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you so much for doing this, by the way, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
It's my pleasure, man.
So yeah, I was in the Ray Peat world and looking around and Googling around and looking at stuff, and I found some of your articles, which were awesome, and started reading some of those. And then I was listening to this podcast called is it the Prime Initiative? Sorry if I'm fucking that up. I'm trying to remember the...
Primitive, I think.
Yeah. Primitive Initiative podcast. Great podcast. And you were on it, and you guys started talking, and you started talking about Vince Gironda, and I was like, oh, my people, because, I mean, I lived in LA, and he used to have his gym out here, and I have a bunch of his books, and was a big fan, and, and also with all his flaws and all that, but, I immediately was like, oh, I got to talk to this guy. So, I just wanted to know, how did you get into, health and fitness and all that? What's your story? Did you started lifting like high school, like everybody else does, or how'd you get into that?
Yeah. Basically, high school. When I was still young, my dad had a little bit of home gym, so he was hitting it at home, but he wasn't all too serious. And then when I got a little bit older, he wanted to do weight training in a gym with me, like just to bond better,
Mm-hmm.
So he had this book which was written by a sport professional. So it was more for like guys that was doing football style training, like sports, not necessarily for bodybuilding and stuff. So it was like sort of a functional style training. So we did that 3 times a week, and then I got really into it and I loved it. So I was like, okay, I want to do this more. So I'm going to go additional days to the gym. So that was basically what I did in high school. And then when I went to college, I started doing 5 days a week. I found Mike O'Hearn. So he basically started Power Bodybuilding. I started that.
Wow. So did you start taking gut right away, or what?
No. So what happened was I was like Googling, because I never did any of my research myself. Although I did find it interesting. My dad had these old bodybuilding books, like typically the 80s, 70s, maybe even 60s bodybuilders.
Is it like
so
Arnold
I was trying to go
and
through
stuff
that.
like that? Sorry to interrupt you. I was thinking, is it like Arnold Schwarzenegger books and all that kind of stuff? I might have one here.
Yeah.
Sort of. There you go. Encyclopedia, right? Sort of those?
Yeah, something similar like that. Yeah.
Classic.
That was great, man. So I was just like reading through it and trying to find out like exercises, but I didn't really comprehend everything because I was really young. So when I got to college, I was like, I'm trying to research these things myself. And then I came across a Rob Reaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, this guy is big. So he did a video with Mike, and I was like, wow, this guy is huge. Like, I've got to get this guy's program. And I started doing his program, and I made some great gains over the years. But then I kind of like moved away from that, and then Martin Burkham also came into the mix with the intermittent fasting and all those kind of stuff.
Of course.
And back then I was just like not really experimenting on my own to find what was working. And then as I got married, we moved into a flat, and we didn't really have any weights. There was also not a gym available. So, I had to start come up with different ways of how to exercise. So I was then incorporating like things like calisthenics and try to use light weights to make it very effective. So funny story is like, since we didn't have weights, I took these 5-liter water bottles, and then I started lifting with the water bottles, and then I would add multiple water bottles together to make my weights. So it's like, okay, this is too complicated. I'm just gonna buy myself some weights.
Oh man, I did that too. I have my family is spread across Russia and Ukraine, and we have like a little vacation home in Ukraine, the Crimea part, And I used to go there, and whenever I'd go there, I love that spot because it's like just a chill little town where we just hang out, beach, and eat like farm grown food. But there's nothing there. There's no gym. There wasn't even internet back then. And still some days it's like choppy. It's awful. But you get away from that stuff. But on the other hand, like I said, there's no gym, so like I really want to work out. So I used to do the same thing. I would fill it up, but I would fill it up with like rice and beans and potatoes and stuff, and do the same thing and try curling and shit, and yeah, it's not the best setup, but whatever gets the job done, right?
Yeah, it works, man. It works. So actually, like right before I got married, I was reading Anabolic Men with Ali.
Mm-hmm.
And then he mentioned Vince Gerardo, but he was basically talking about the eggs, and he was talking about using glandular supplements like the testis and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of like brushed it off, ignored it. But then like a few months later, I was like, I got to check this guy out. It's really interesting what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been basically when I started my Vince Gerardo journey. I tried to find as much content as possible on him, like the way he trained. And then I experimented like with his diet. That's when I went into the keto stuff, like the zero carb.
Of course.
And honestly, initially it was relatively okay, but like after 2 months, you feel like you're burning out in a way. Like this is really getting difficult to operate in this way. You're feeling a weird stimulation effect. So I didn't quite like that.
Yeah, I mean,
And then
you get he's very well known for being kind of, even though I love a lot of his humor and some of his writings, it's kind of like a lot of it is no bullshit, and he was ahead of his time in some aspects, I think, you know what I mean. But he's very well known to be kind of a dick, right? Like everybody says he there's that story of Arnold showing up to the gym here in the Valley, and Arnold not being Arnold yet. He was just, he just moved to the States. He's just being a bodybuilder. And he walks into Vince's gym and he says, "Hey, I'm Arnold," and Vince just goes, "You look like a fat fuck to me," and that's the story, And so, yeah, and I think there's something to that because, man, it's hard to eat roast beef and mayonnaise for 7 days straight, right? I mean, it's just you don't feel like having a good time all the time after that.
No, man, it's funny. I remember another story from Vince. He took his nutrition advice really seriously, and if people didn't do it, he kind of like flipped out. So I remember this one story. There was this guy. He was like having a loaf of bread in the gym, and Vince just walked over. He took the bread and like threw it across the gym.
Yes, get the fuck out.
That was really funny.
Yeah, there's a similar one about sit-ups, because he was super anti-overtraining abs. Whereas a lot of guys back in those days, the golden era and the silver era, as they called it, those guys would do, like there's one of my favorite bodybuilders, Zabo Kaczynski. You ever heard of him, Zabo?
I don't think so.
Well, you should check him out. But he doesn't have a lot of writings. He's more of a kind of a guy just that was there doing it at the time, pre-Arnold era. Anyway, he used to do like 500 leg raises and 500 Roman chair sit-ups every workout. That was like his thing, and he did have phenomenal abs. But Vince's thing was like, no, don't do that because you're not gonna burn off all that fat just doing all those sit-ups. So you got to focus on the diet. You got to focus on other things. So he was super anti overtraining abs. He did have some abdominal trainings, but it would be like stuff that's similar to hypertrophy training, like 3x12, 315, whatever. So anyway, one guy's doing sit-ups in the gym, and the same thing. He just walks over and gives him a paper, and it has his refund on it to the gym, and just get the fuck out of here. And that's that.
Yeah, man, that guy is legend. He had some issues, but really respectful for what the things he did. Like, it really inspired me. One of the exercises that I really still do, that he regarded very high, is the wide grip chest dips. That's basically, he said you got to do that, and that is basically one of the best chest exercises you can do. So I still do it to this day.
Yeah, and Larry Scott is also who's the first Mr. Olympia, if people don't know. Larry Scott was also a big fan of that. There's lots of pictures of him doing it where you kind of have your chin down, you flare out your elbows, and it just really hits that outer lower part of the pec, doesn't it? It's a great exercise too. Whereas the standard dips, it's kind of like a mix in between shoulder, triceps, and pecs, right? Whereas the wider one, just especially if you put your chin down and lean into it a little bit, oh man, it just kills your pecs, right?
Yeah, you should do it on rings, man. That is a lot more difficult, but it's a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, I do that too, brother. Yeah, I'm big into ring training, a big fan of that stuff. I started gymnastics when I was a kid too, so yeah. Big into that. So when
Super
you
cool, man.
discovered Vince's work, did you start doing some of his programs, like, I don't know, 4x15? No, yeah, 15 sets of 4, 10x10, 8x8, 6x6.
Uh, I started doing like, yeah, the most common one was the 8x8 and the 10x10.
Mm-hmm.
But then the one that caught my attention was the four sides to a muscle,
Mm-hmm.
where you basically pick four exercises for each muscle group and then you run through the cycle like twice. So you have a morning workout and then you have an evening workout. And that made a lot of sense to me. So I basically tried that out, had a lot of results with it. But the thing is, like, it's almost like you're doing one giant set, because it is basically a giant set.
Yeah.
You're having no rest between each exercises. So that was basically really high intensity exercise that I did on his part. I did get great gains, but then I didn't make great strength gains. Like, I did gain strength. And what inspired me, or at least motivated me to continue with his style of training, was that even in his 60s, he could do a wide grip bench press with like 300 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, so this guy is strong, so his training must be effective for strength training as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept at it. But eventually I just switched back to longer rest, because then the research convinced me that basically if you are going to do like high intensity workouts,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to spike your cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be a lot more stressful in your body. So I was like, okay, I'm going to switch back to more of a traditional style. I'm going to do some longer rest, lower reps, because Vince was all about like 12
Mm-hmm.
or so reps. And so I was going back to a strength training, maybe starting with a heavy set of 6, and then doing a similar approach still, but I would go 6 reps on the first exercise, 8, 10, 12 on the fourth exercise. So I would then increase, and I also had success with that. But then eventually I just completely switched away from four sides to a muscle and short rest. Although I would rather I would do a mix between the power bodybuilding. So you have your powerlifting exercise first, long rest to build the mass and the size. And then I would basically go for the four sides to a muscle afterwards, which is more of the hypertrophy work. I also found that to be great. But then again, you can run into things like, you're working too hard. And the thing that got me away from that style of training was I wanted to be more functional. And you look at these powerlifters and bodybuilders, and they can't do a pistol squat, they can't do a muscle up, they can't do anything of that. So I really enjoy doing parkour and free running. But if you're heavy, you're kind of like slow, and the way you train specifically with powerlifting and bodybuilding doesn't make you fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make you an athlete. You have to train in a specific way to get your muscles to work optimally to jump high. You don't want your antagonist and agonist to work against each other.
Of course. Yeah,
So
I totally agree with you, man. I mean, yeah, a lot of people, that's kind of the big misconception too, is with people that just don't work out, right? If they see somebody who's, a super jacked Michael Hearn, and Michael Hearn may be very athletic and, a huge power lifter with all kinds of records, but they just think if somebody's super jacked, it's like, oh, he must be super athletic. And that's not always the case, And even in Vince's book, Unleashing the Wild Physique is the name of the book, which is a great book. Even he says himself that what he does is cosmetic bodybuilding, meaning, he wants you to look good. He's not trying to get you to do, like you said, pistol squats or, inverted rows or whatever it is. He's just trying to get you to look better. Although I think, with him, because he was able to do one-arm chin-ups. There's pictures of him doing a chin-up with some weights hanging on him. He was a very athletic guy. So, again, a lot of flaws, but my biggest takeaway from him is like, I think a lot of people started to love those like 6x6, 8x8, 10x10, just because a lot of people would used to go into the gym, and still to this day, go to the gym, they lay down on their bench press, they do a set, then they do 4 sets on their iPhone. They do their fucking, text messaging and all that. And then they do another set. And then like, it's like a 3-hour workout, but they did like 5 sets. They're barely sweating. And I think he was just the first guy to kind of be like, hey, let's work out. Let's get the fuck out, right? Like, let's get some work in, And in those days, and like I said, even today, people just don't do that. So I think that's why a lot of those programs, people think that that's all that he was about. But if you read his book, yeah, he has all sorts of stuff. He used to do, 4 reps for 15 sets, which is very much strength training kind of stuff. So, yeah, I just think he was way ahead of his time, in many aspects.
Yeah, I was just bummed that he died early. I was like,
Totally.
Because I would typically take someone like Vince, which is just completely opposite from Pete. And I was like, let's see who's going to live the longest, and then I'm going to decide like if the Vince Johanna diet is bad or not.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
that's
yeah.
flawed, but that's what I thought.
Well, the
So he was
story
like,
that I know around town is that the last 20 years, fitness industry took over, and nobody wants those kind of people like him around anymore. They're kind of like no quote unquote bullshit, whatever that means. But I just think he had like a troubled relationship with his son. I think it was, I think it's a lot of aspects. I don't think it was only the diet. Although, of course, the stories of him doing like a steak and eggs diet for 9 months to get shredded for contests, I don't think that did him a lot of good for his health, longevity wise, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it
So
was funny. You always said that if you really want to see the effect of an exercise or a diet, you have to do it for like 9 months.
mhm.
Like, that's pretty crazy. I'm not going to do that. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he was a committed motherfucker, and he got a lot of people into the game. One of his students is still around, Muhammad Walkaway. Do you know that bodybuilder?
Oh, he was my favorite, the bodybuilder from the Vince. The
Yeah,
Vince trained him. So, man, phenomenal physique. Crazy.
phenomenal. A short guy, not a big guy. He was so probably that's why he never got the Olympia crown, but totally worthy of it, right? Great physique, and yeah, one of my favorites, and just an overall very nice guy. And I've read some of his writings too. He has a few out there, and I think he's trying to get into the game now too. Also doing some seminars, stuff like that. Cool guy. So what else did you? So a lot of people go from Vince low carb stuff to like maybe Charles Poliquin. Are you into that kind of guy? Those sort of writings? Do you know who he is?
I did check his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did check his stuff. But that was when I was well into doing rape beat. So I was not really convinced with doing, like Charles Poliquin was all about doing really long eccentrics,
Mm-hmm.
like a 10-second eccentric or a 8-second eccentric. And I was like, perhaps that is effective, but he was mostly training people for sport.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't think that's going to be more effective than what I'm currently doing. If you just focus on the muscle and you do a controlled concentric and eccentric, you will still get great results. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've really gave him a worthy shot. I haven't really given him 9 months of my training time.
Yeah,
So I can't really
it's
say
put
it's
out there
effective
as
or
sort
not.
of like the top of the science chain kind of training, that he kind of knows everything. And, I love the guy and I met him and I've worked with him and, also has, everybody has flaws, but I'm just saying, yeah. So, it's definitely, like you said, on the spectrum of being an athlete. So there's like, a lot of complex training programs, but a lot of them are simple too. But it just seems like the progression, natural progression, at least with people I've talked to, is like Vince Gironda, then Charles Poliquin, because he was also all about kind of earn your carbs and, have your meat and nuts for breakfast kind of thing. So I don't know if you read that article, Meat and Nut Breakfast.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah,
knows
he
that
was
one.
similar to that carb backload guy. Like
Mm-hmm.
he had basically the same principle. And I was just like, after I've read Pete's work, and you understand the concept that you don't really have to earn your carbs. Your body can basically use the carbohydrates just fine.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not going to be stored, it's going to be oxidized. So you really don't have to worry about it. And
Mm-hmm.
if you really look at the research, carb doesn't make you fat. You don't have to be in a low carb diet to remain lean or anything like that. So I just didn't give his dietary advice any second thought, especially since he recommended enormous doses of fish oils. So I
Yes,
was like
which
very
I've done.
skeptical.
Sadly, I've done the 30
Wow.
grams of. Yeah, man, it's pretty not for a long time because I would just have the worst fucking gastritis. I would just have these fish burps, and then you'll write to him and you're like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, you're using the bad quality fish oil. You got to buy my fish oil." And then you buy his fish oil, and I have the same result. And then it's like, oh, you're not producing enough hydrochloric acid. You got to start taking hydrochloric acid with it. And then it's like, nope, still getting fish burps and just yeah, I didn't I tried it, because I'm all about kind of, I want to experience it because at the end of the day, you and I, if we disagree on something, you'll have 30 studies and I'll have 30 studies and they'll say the complete opposite thing. So it's like, I mean, we're not getting anywhere with that. So to me, it's just like, let's experience it, so I try everything, unless if it's, I mean, I'm not gonna jump off a building, but you know what I'm saying. If it sounds like
Yeah.
something, okay, like, all right, so I give it a shot, and if it's not working for me, it's not working for me. I don't give a shit how many studies you have to tell me that this is the best thing or not. It's just, vice versa. If it's working for me, but all the studies you have say that, oh, well, the NASAM fitness group proved, and it's like, I don't care. It's working for me. I'm building muscle or whatever. So you mentioned Ray Peat. So how did you get into his work? What was your first initial drop into that world?
Yeah, so basically when I was doing I was really fascinated with Vince Giron. I was trying to find everything on him, and especially with his use of, he was even using vitamin C and vitamin E around the workout and around the day. And I was like, well, the research shows that it blunts the hypertrophy response. And I was like, well, Vince should probably have known better. But, recent research have basically concluded that antioxidants doesn't really, or specifically vitamin C and E, doesn't really mess with the hypertrophy response from exercise. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, he is recommending specifically wheat germ oil. So I was wondering, is there something specific to the wheat germ oil? And I tried to search online. I couldn't find anything except one link, and that was to the Ray Peat forum. So then I came across Hayded talk of it, and I was just amazed because he completely removed the polyunsaturated fats, but contained all the good stuff. So it was all these waxes and long-chain saturated fats with the vitamin E. So I was like, wow, this is a phenomenal vitamin E supplement. This, Vince would be proud of such a supplement. So that was basically when I came across Hayded, and I checked out all of his other work, and that was really interesting. So I was just at first I was like, it's a Ray Peat forum, but I don't see Ray Peat on the forum. And then eventually
which people don't know, learned, he's like, it's not the guy. If you're looking for Ray Peat, you're like, where's the workouts of him bench pressing? I don't get it. Where's the videos of Ray?
Yeah. So then I just basically read a lot of Hayded stuff. I went onto his profile and I just checked out all his content, because he seemed to be kind of one of the most prolific posters on the forum, and he seemed to really know a lot because he's been doing it for a long time. So that's basically when I started learning a lot about the carbohydrates and how to make it work for you, and debunking a lot of the other science like PUFAS is bad for you, even omega-3, beware of excess phosphate, and all of those kind of stuff. And that was basically my intro. And once I've gone peating, it just feels like it resonates so much. If you read Ray's work specifically on his website and through his newsletters, it just makes so much sense that if you see an opposing study like PUFAS is good, you feel like Ray has the amount of research or the depth of the research that Ray have done is just mind-boggling to me. Every time he's on a podcast or he's writing a newsletter, and you have this snippy answer in your head, okay, you're wrong on this because this and this, and then Pete just cites a study, and you're like, okay, my understanding of biology is wrong.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy the understanding that he has all the way down into biology. You can't solve a problem here. You have to go all the way to the root, and that's what I feel that Ray Peat understands more than most people, how the body works.
Yeah, and I love that too. Because it's like with bodybuilding, right? Or just working out. You'll have a person. How do I get big biceps? Do these 3 sets of curls. And it's like, okay, and you'll do those curls and it's not growing, and you're like, how do I get big biceps? The bodybuilder will tell you the same thing, but what you're not realizing is that this bodybuilder has this huge understanding of how to tense the muscle, how to feel it. He's been doing it for 10 years, you know what I'm saying? So he has a great mind-muscle connection, which a thing that nobody really talks about these days, right? It's just about do this movement and that's it. It's like, there's this huge understanding. And the same thing I feel like is happening with Ray Peat, right? It's like he hasn't just read all the articles and studies on this stuff. He kind of really understands, physiology and biology. And he may be wrong, or maybe proved wrong in the future, God knows. But at least you get a sense of, like you said, he has an understanding. It's not just him reciting and regurgitating a lot of, studies, right? Like a lot of people do, and they think that I get it,
Yeah, totally agree, man. And it's correct what you mentioned about the way people train nowadays is they don't have a mind to muscle connection. And this is also the principles from Vince that I've learned. Is basically you have to visualize the muscle the way you want to train it. And I have found that you can have great mind to muscle connection, but you still have to visualize how you want the muscle to look. Because I found that, let's say I'm doing a tricep dip and I'm just not focusing on the movement, even though I have a great mind to muscle connection. Okay, I want my triceps to look like Muhammad Makaway's triceps.
Yeah, some of the best. Yeah.
And then I can immediately feel that I'm shifting my body in a different way.
Hmm.
And then I'm definitely feeling my triceps while I'm doing the dips. So you have to visualize. There's a lot of concepts from Vince
Yeah.
that has helped me out of
And
my
you're not gonna get it
training.
in doing it for a few weeks or a few months. You got to try it. It's just like anything in life, you know. People think it's just, you know. I mean, at the end of the yes, of course, training can be made simple. Just go in, do these sets, and get out. Of course, you know, as a beginner, that's fine. But as you progress, you're gonna have to start thinking about some of these things because you know I can do a row with my back or I can do a row with my bicep. Do you know what I'm saying? Where I'm pulling something, and a lot of beginners do that. That's one common mistake for back training. People who have like giant pecs, but they just have no idea how to engage their lats. When they're doing their rows or pull-ups, they're just only using their biceps because they just haven't even thought about like, oh, I have to visualize or think about pulling my elbow back and not pulling my arm towards me, which that will increase my bicep. And if we're trying to train back, why are you trying to make your bicep work? You got to make your back work. So, things like that are really important to me.
Yeah, like proper training is hard work for sure. It's not just physically demanding; it's also mentally demanding. And no matter how long you do it, you still have to be conscious to remind yourself to focus on the muscle that you're working. It doesn't necessarily become automatic. You can still detrain in that way.
Totally, totally. So you got into Ray's work and you started reading the articles. And was there before that? Was there a certain way that you were doing things with your diet and your overall lifestyle that changed when you started getting into Ray Peat's work?
I wouldn't say much. I would say, like, obviously, I was doing venture runners work, so it was completely the opposite. So I was like reading Pete's work, and I was like, okay, great, I can have milk and have my fruit juice, which lucky for me, I always enjoyed having. Like, if I was as a child, I would prefer drinking milk, eating fruits, especially citrus fruit, and then having occasional meat. So
Mm.
that's basically my diet. And then once I've read Pete stuff, it's like, this suits me perfect. So I'm just going to do it. Like, I love those foods.
Mm-hmm.
So then I think my diet shifted. I don't think I started immediately with fruits. I just got myself some good quality milk, had that. I didn't cut out protein because I still feel like, if you crave a certain food, you must have it. Like, there's so many people that ignore their cravings and they just don't resolve health issues. Like, your body is telling you need a certain nutrient in that food. So if you crave it, you most likely will benefit from that food, depending obviously on what kind of food that is
Of course.
or what nutrient is in that food. So let's say, for example, you crave meat. So the saturated fat could be calming for you. It could be increasing your metabolic rate, your temperatures, which will have a benefit on you. So I felt in that regard, like, I really enjoy meat. So I
Mm-hmm.
want to eat more meat. And funny enough, I don't know if it's specifically because it's summer and it's hotter. I feel that I don't crave meat at all. So I'm just having a bunch of milk and fruit juice
Mm-hmm.
and occasional shellfish and occasional liver. So that's basically my diet. And so I take that as a sign, like, I'm not going to eat meat because I'm not going to crave it. I'm not going to force myself to consume something. Like, I was able to get a really good quality organ meat mix. And I was consuming that for a while, but then I just completely lost my taste for it. I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to my body. I'm going to stop eating it, no matter how many benefits these foods might have, how many micronutrients they have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to listen to my body. Like, I'm probably replenished, so I don't need it.
It's so refreshing to hear, man. Because a lot of people will say like, I stopped eating this because I read a bunch of research, blah blah blah. And like I said, there's a place and a time and a place for that, and that's great. But at the end of the day, again, it's like, yeah, man, listening to your body and actually being honest with yourself. Like, are you craving these things? Are you wanting these things? And yeah, it's a lot of indoctrination that goes into it, right? It's also like with sugar thing. It's like you're craving sugar. Well, you know why you're craving sugar, Ons? It's because you're a sugar addict. You have a problem, and it's just like, is it though, And yeah, same thing with me, Before even hearing the name Ray, um, I also kind of discovered for myself that like, when I eat a lot of starchy bread or rice, man, it just feels like it. I feel like I have a tire around my gut right away. And whereas if I eat the same amount or even more of fruits, I just don't feel as heavy. I don't feel as bloated. So I always had that in the back of my mind of like, yeah, if I want some carbs, it seems like for me, fruits always do a better job. I always feel lighter on them. And plus, I'm getting all these vitamins. and minerals and et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, you have your starchy rice and whatever. It's like, it's really not that much nutrients in it, right? Which is funny because, all the bodybuilding forums or whatever, it's always about like eat your oats, eat your brown rice because that's the healthy stuff. And I've always said that even, when I was really young, like, but it doesn't really have a lot of nutrition, does it? So like, why are we supposed to eat all this oatmeal that has like, I don't even know, has some traces of B vitamins, etc. Right? It's like not even nothing there really.
Yeah, for sure. Did you ever have to recover metabolically from something?
Did I have to recover metabolically from it?
From something? Did you ever feel like you were metabolically compromised and you had to recover?
Oh, definitely. In my low carb kind of Vince days, when I was the same thing, when I was very convinced, like, okay, you don't really need carbs at all. I never did like a prolonged meat diet, like a carnivore diet. I did do that for weeks at a time. I've tested that, messed around with it, but I would always come back to like, oh my God, I need to eat some fucking ice cream or I'm going to kill somebody. So I started, so I kind of stuck to eating a lower carb diet, doing sort of the Vince Gironda way, which is, maybe 2 to 3 days, you're having no carbohydrate and then you're refueling. So that always worked for me, and I wanted to talk to you about it. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it does work, right? Like having a low carb diet, cutting out your carbs works for a lot of people. A lot of people lose a lot of fat, even if they're not trying to count their calories, even if they're eating a good amount of food. There's got to be something to it. I mean, what are your thoughts? Is it just initially, do you think it's, water weight, as people say? I mean, why do you think it worked for so many people?
Well, initially, it's definitely a lot of water weight because you're cutting out a lot of gut irritating foods in the first place. So not a lot of people like vegetables. I know if you're going over to a ketogenic diet, you're most likely not immediately going to introduce a lot of vegetables into your diet anyway. So you're basically getting rid of a lot of water retention in the first 2 weeks, but that's basically what happens on any diet, even if it's high carb, because you're still going to be most likely cutting some carbohydrates. So depending on the health of the person, some people don't lose water when they cut carbs because they're not in an unhealthy state, whereas other people do have water retention from some kind of gut irritating food that they're eating. So they will drop weight. But actually, the research have shown that in the span of 1 year, people in a high carb diet and a low carb diet have equal amount of fat loss. Mm-hmm. It's not that one group is actually better than the other one. Yes, initially in the first 6 months, one group might be ahead of the other one. But then at 1 year, it basically pans out. And even that, adhering to the low carb diet takes a lot of determination from people. And the research actually shown that even with weekly classes and education on what foods to avoid, even after 1 year, people still end up at around 150 grams of carbohydrates per day. So it's just intuitively that people start to eat more carbohydrates because they do feel better. If you're going to feel stressed, you're going to eat that muffin because it makes you feel better. And even people think like, oh, you're addicted to the sugar. Mm-hmm. You're not. That's basically helping with the stress response. Mm-hmm. And people's depriving themselves from that basic nutrients that they need. So obviously, if you're metabolically compromised, removing whatever is causing some kind of inflammation can be beneficial in the short term. So if you go on a ketogenic diet, let's say someone is fat, they are overweight, they have some kind of metabolic disorder. So they have inflammation going on, and that inflammation, oxidative stress, is causing the mitochondria to be smaller and fragmented. And that in itself is promoting insulin resistance, and it oxidizes predominantly fat. So that type of mitochondria is causing insulin resistance. So basically, once you cut out the carbohydrates and you cut out most of the gut irritating foods, your body can actually reduce some of the oxidative stress, and those mitochondria the excess small mitochondria can then fuse and become larger mitochondria, or they can be consumed by mitophagy and eliminated from the body. So once your mitochondria becomes bigger again, it can oxidize fuel properly. So those small mitochondria, despite the fact that they are burning mostly fat, they actually have reduced ability to produce energy. So you're in a very bad situation on that part. So the solution isn't necessarily cut out carbohydrates, it's fixing your cellular health. You want to fix your mitochondria. Mm-hmm. And for that to happen, you have to inhibit lipolysis because your cells are still being flooded with excess fat. Mm-hmm. And the excess fat oxidation is increasing oxidative stress even more and continuing this feed-forward loop. So if you have inflammation, you've been eating a lot of polyunsaturated fats, you will most likely have elevated lipolysis that's flooding the liver, it's increasing triglycerides, it's overwhelming the cells. So
Right.
people always think about they address it from the wrong side. Let's say lipolysis is the problem, but let's cut out the carbohydrates. It should be the other way around. But fixing the root cause, which is basically stopping the inflammation, gut irritation, so on, is much more difficult. It takes longer to happen. So they just go on a low carb diet. But
Yes.
in
I
the
think
short term, you could,
Sorry, man.
yeah.
I was gonna say I think that's the big key here is that a lot of people, it takes time, and like you said, if people want quick results, and so they just cut out the carbs, and then it's like, hey, it works, so why think about anything else? And I think that is a big key of why people go on low carbs diets and do lose weight or do feel better on them. And like you said, part of it is because they're also cutting out a lot of bullshit too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, like, let's say someone doesn't even go low carb, they just go paleo, they're still eliminating a lot of problematic foods. So it's not that dropping carbs is the bad guy, it's dropping some of those irritating foods that can be a problem. And like, let's say you are metabolically compromised and you have tried a high carb diet and you don't do good on it. Like, no one is saying you should do that. Perhaps you can start with low, like 100 grams of carbohydrates to 200 grams. That, like, let's say 150. That's a sweet spot for people to, not produce too much oxidative stress inflammation, but still have some carbohydrates to support their metabolism. And once they improve by eating good foods, reducing their inflammation, they can slowly increase the carbohydrates until they find a sweet spot for that. So you don't have to jump from one extreme to the other extreme, because it does take time for your body to readapt from burning fat all the way to burning glucose. Like, if you're healthy, that adaptation can happen quickly, but if you're unhealthy, that adaptation can take quite a while.
Yeah. I've always thought in the back of my mind too, that like I don't actually want to be the guy that's always has to do the extreme diet to lose fat or to get shredded. I want to be the guy at the gym, which we all know a guy like that he eats McDonald's or, let's say he doesn't even eat whatever. Let's just say I do know guys that eat lots of carbohydrates and they have lots of rice, potatoes, all kinds of stuff in their diet, and they're shredded, and discounting the guys that are on steroids, which there are a lot of these days. But I mean, you know what I mean? I've always thought, like, I want to be that guy that I eat tons of carbs and I stay lean and I don't gain too much fat. And that has been hard for me, before, which is why I've always gravitated towards the Vince Gironda style of diet, because I was like, well, man, if I eat too many carbs, I just feel fat, So you think that's what's happening there with people? It's like the problem is that your body's having a hard time metabolically.
That's most likely what's happening. That if you break it down into simple biology, you're absorbing the carbohydrates, it's going to the liver, it's being stored as glycogen, it's going into the muscles, it's being oxidized as fuel. Then in that regard, it shouldn't cause any bloating. It shouldn't make you fat or cause problems. So it clearly shows that there is something blocking some of those natural processes, and that's why you're reacting negatively to a certain food. Like, specifically, water retention basically shows that you're getting an immune response, you're getting some sort of inflammation, and that's why you're suddenly retaining water. And the first place that I look when that happens is the gut. Like, did you eat something funny? Most likely, yes, you did eat something funny. Or were you perhaps stressed that day? Like, stress can inhibit proper digestion. It can create leaky gut if you're not having enough carbohydrates, or your blood sugar has dropped too low. So there's a few things you can look at. What is causing that water retention or gut inflammation? But for me, it's most likely you're either stressed or having gut inflammation. And for me, when I've started really focusing on minimizing the stress, maximizing my sleep quality, making sure my blood sugar is staying optimal. So I'm eating non-gut irritating foods. I'm eating highly nutritious foods. And as my health is really improving, I can feel that I can go longer without food. So let's say you're trying the high carb diet and you feel like it's not working. It's only been 4 weeks. Like, I've been doing this for a month. It's not working. Now, it takes much longer than that. Like, if you want to recover or replenish a certain nutrient, it might take quite a few months for that to happen. It's not necessarily one nutrient that can be the problem. It can be multiple nutrients. And still, every stressor that you go through can cause some kind of epigenetic modification in your body. So your body has to reverse that changes. Like, if that change is not reversed, you can maintain that suboptimal metabolic state, even though the stress is passed. So you want to make sure your body is in a state to handle the stress And then you want to make sure your body is in such a healthy way that they can reverse those epigenetic changes. Like, and one of the most simple things that you can do is to boost your NAD to NADH ratio. Your body can take that to reverse the epigenetic changes. But again, that takes time. And sometimes you have to do certain serious measures to get that NADI enough, or, to kickstart those processes.
Yeah. And that's one of the common kind of, problems that people say with the repeat diet is that a lot of people get fat very fast. And I think part of that is that a lot of people probably just read the articles and they're like, okay, I'm going to have 3 pints of Haagen-Dazs every day, and I think that's the problem. It's like, well, he's not saying that, right? Although I love the guy and a lot of his stuff, but sometimes, yeah, it's like, I don't know if everybody can handle 3 quarts of milk. That's a lot of milk, man. And 3 quarts of milk, I mean, a lot of people will get fat on it, no matter what you say. Have you had that experience with people?
I try to make sure I educate my clients or the people I talk to about calories. Like, if you're going to overeat on 3 pins of ice cream, or you're going to eat a lot of ice cream, you're going to get fat, because that's a lot of fat, that's a lot of sugar, it's low protein, so you're not really stimulating the metabolic rate. Like, protein is the most thermogenic and the others are not really. So you are most likely not stimulating thermogenesis very well, and you're going to be storing a lot of that because, first of all, you're also metabolically compromised. So you have to take in consideration your total calories that you're eating. Like, as you improve your metabolism, yes, then you can eat more, but it's not going to be as much as people think it is. Let's say your metabolic rate, in an extreme example, is 1,500 to maintain your weight. And then as you increase your metabolism, or at least restore it, you can get it back to 2,500. That's basically, most people can maintain their weight at 2,500. And then if you are really metabolically gifted, so to speak, whatever that is, then you can maybe like 3,000, 4,000 calories. But, it's really a misconception about a fast metabolism. A lot of people on the forums, like, you want a fast metabolism, you want to eat 4,000 calories. And for me, it's like, why do you want to eat that much food? Like, do you like I don't want to eat that much food.
That's always been my thought too. It's like, and I don't know, respect to those guys who are really doing the work and actually experimenting with that. But I have a feeling that a lot of those guys just, again, they just read the stuff and they just like, oh, this is what you want to do. But it's like, have you tried that shit, man? Have you ever actually done it? And besides that, have you and 5 other people that done it like that? I don't know. Why would you want to eat 5,000 calories? It's a lot of food, right? And it's just, I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah. I don't understand that. Like, if you're active, I can understand. Like, if you're outside and you're working, yes, I understand you need more calories to sustain your metabolism. But if you're sedentary and you're doing a little bit of brain work during the day, you're not really requiring a lot of calories to maintain your health. If your thyroid's optimal, you will be able to produce enough energy. You don't need to eat 4,000 calories. But let's say, to be safe, 2,500 to 3,000 calories is a good amount. But I'd say most people will slowly gain weight on 3,000 calories if they are sedentary.
And so you mentioned protein, like with your clients, because I think you work with a lot of guys that want to put on some muscle, right, and probably burn some fat. So how about the protein suggestions? Because Ray's suggestions are typically like around 100 grams, right? He doesn't over or kind of underdo the protein, which 100 grams is, I think it's fair, right, for an average person. So do you tend to raise that up a little bit? Do you follow the bodybuilding stuff, like 2 to 4 grams, per pound or whatever? Or how do you do it?
Yeah, so I actually work with a lot of clients that also don't want to really, change their physique or anything. They just want to lose fat. They don't really want to build muscle. So regardless if someone is training or not, I try to increase their protein, especially if they want to lose fat, because that's going to help them with satiety. That's going to increase their thermogenesis. Like, animal protein or animal foods in general is just one of the best sources of micronutrients. I don't really rely on vegetables for micronutrients. But the thing is, I feel that most people are indoctrinated that they should be eating vegetables. Yeah. So if I just tell them, you don't need vegetables, you can just eat meat and maybe a fruit and some milk, you should be fine. It's like, what about vegetables? Like, you can have vegetables if you want. Like, I don't care.
It's so funny though, right? I was talking about it with a client of mine. It's like, it's like his girlfriend is like, vegetarian, kind of pescatarian. But it's just funny to me, right? It's like, hey, do you really enjoy roasted Brussels sprouts? If you do, my man, that's great. Go ahead and have your roasted Brussels sprouts. I can eat it, by the way. I'm one of those weird guys. Like, I don't really have a food I don't like. I love weird. I love beef liver. You know, I'm Russian, so we do eat a lot of that and growing up. So I don't, you know, I've eaten natto. I don't know. You know, I don't really have anything I don't like I find disgusting. So I'm kind of lucky in that regard. But I would be an asshole if I were to tell you, like, oh my God, I can't wait to have the arugula salad tonight. Like, you know, I don't care. You know, I'll eat it. I'll be fine. Like, I'm not going to complain about it. But like you said, yeah, a lot of people are so, they have it in their head, right? And part of it is the, you know, the culture, part of it is the government, part of it is the fitness industry, that it's like, you got to have your vegetables, or if you don't, you'll just explode.
Yeah, yeah. So back to the protein. Like, I try to increase protein not just because I feel protein is necessary for fat loss, or the main reason I really do it is for micronutrients. And to take care of the micronutrients, I just end up higher with protein. Let's say just 150. 150 is usually where I end up. 120, 150. I don't always want to give people too much because that's also not something they used to. Like, I grew up in a family where meat was kind of like exotic, if you know what I mean. You get your lamb chops, but you can only have like one or two only at dinner because, like, I don't know what reason. Doesn't make any sense to me.
I know what you mean.
So I feel most people are the same. They might have a little bit egg for breakfast, and they might have a little like a chicken for lunch, and then at dinner they have their big meal, their red meat, and so I feel a lot of it's indoctrination. So I don't want to give them, I have some red meat for lunch, you know, that will be best for you. But so if someone is open-minded to doing that, like, by all means, go ahead. But I want to take it slowly. Like, let's see how you react to that. I'm not going to give you something that you're not going to react well to. So I want you to experiment with, let's say I have 6 to 8 ounces of meat per meal, and see how you feel. If you feel better, let's keep it at that. You know, if you what your cravings like, let's try to learn what your body is telling you, because a lot of people is ignoring what their cravings, what they're feeling and stuff. And then let's say they're craving something weird. It's like, oh, let's replace it with, you know, a more healthier alternative. You know, and you can just have whatever vegetables you want. But okay, so that's just the normal clients that don't want to build muscle. So the clients that want to build muscle, I tell them, like, this is what the research shows. If you're serious about building muscle, you know, just to be on the safe side, 2 grams per kilogram, 1 gram per pound. That's what the research shows. Stick to that. And I like to stick to the higher end myself, like, especially if you're trying to lose fat as well, you want to keep your protein in the higher end. And I don't force them to do anything. Like, if you're not going to do that, then, you know, it's not my body. You know, and regardless, like, there is so much inter-individual variation that someone might actually build muscle on a lower protein diet that's optimal for him. And someone might require more depending on their craving. Like, I had this one client, he was eating really high protein, like 300 plus grams of, like 350 grams of protein. And I tried to bring it down to like 200, which is still high on the high end. And then a few weeks, months later, he was like, this is my diet. And he was like back to 350. And I was like, okay, you know what? If you want to eat that much protein, go ahead. You're probably craving it for some reason.
Yeah, and talking about another indoctrinated thing, right? It's like in bodybuilding and fitness stuff. It's totally like, eat a lot of protein, right? And it's protein is always kind of talked about. And I'm like, I don't know. You know, I felt fine on 100 grams, you know, and I like working out, you know, a couple times a week, heavy, like, you know, pushing myself. I felt fine, you know, as granted that I've had my carbohydrates though, you know. Now, if you don't have, you know, if you have 100 grams carbohydrates and 100 grams protein, then it's like, oh boy, yeah, that gets tough there. So you got to have one or the other, at least a little bit more of it, right?
Yeah, I think you're relatively safe if you are at least maintaining your weight or trying to gain some weight with carbohydrates. Then I think your protein can be on the lower side if your carbs are really high to preserve that muscle mass. So I personally have never experimented with such low protein just because I've also been indoctrinated.
Well, hey, we all been. Yeah.
And I can't test my muscle mass like every month to see what's going on. Like, I can't just readily do experiments on myself. Like, okay, I'm going to eat 2 grams per kilograms of protein for like 9 months, and then I'm going to go to like 100 grams protein for the next 9 months and see with which one I do best. Like, I can't do that. So I'm just going to be on the safe side with the protein, just go high. So let's say, for example, I'm drinking 5 liters of milk per day. That gives me about 170, 180 grams of protein, or 150. I'm not sure, like 30. So like about 150, 160 grams of protein.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have additional meat or something just to keep it like to 180. I just want to make sure I'm getting like 180 because I'm repping. And so if I'm having a lot of milk, I'm almost by default having a good amount of protein as well. So like I mentioned, I'm not going to force myself to eat protein. Like if I'm going to cut my milk down to, let's say, 2 liters, then I have to eat a lot of meat to make up for that protein. But I don't crave meat, so I'm not going to force my body and, cram down protein that I don't crave.
Yeah. I'm the same way. Yeah, I have no problem eating, if I had to stick to like a vegetarian diet where I could eat mix up. Sorry, I'm just waking up here. This LA time is too much. You're in South Africa, I'm in LA, so I'm just trying to let people know. If I had to just eat eggs and milk, I could do fine long term for that. I do like my burger here and there, everyone, but if I had to cut it out for a while, I could do it no problem. Although, vice versa, like if I had to cut out milk and eggs, it would be tough. Yeah, it would be tough to just eat meat every day, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do a carnivore for sure.
No, so you never tried that out then, huh?
No. I only did the Vince diet, keto. So that was basically a little bit of organ meat and just a bunch of eggs. That's what's my diet. It wasn't appealing at all.
Yeah,
but it worked.
Avocado oil and coconut oil, stuff like that, basically.
No, I didn't have an F, so I did a little bit of dairy and then a lot of cream with a lot of eggs.
Oh, so you did it with cream. Oh, okay.
So it's just egg shakes all day long.
I don't know, man. I never went with keto because that just sounded awful. And whenever I have that much fat, I just have straight up diarrhea, So I was just like, no. Carnivore I did, I could do. But oh man, keto, I don't know how people, it's tough. It was tough on me. So like the toughest people I think to work with are sometimes the skinny fat kind of guys. You know what I mean? The guys that are like, they don't have 100 pounds of weight to lose or 50 pounds. And they're not very skinny to where you can just give them, gallon of milk a day and give them working out and they just start, getting thicker and putting on muscle. It's those guys that are kind of in the middle, they're not super skinny, but they're not muscular and they want to put some weight on and, and muscle weight and lose some fat. So how do you approach those sort of guys? Do you just get up their protein? What do you do?
Yeah, I basically start with protein, and then I would basically I would try with a low fat first. Make sure the carbohydrates are good because I want to manage their stress. If the stress is managed, they can basically start to lose some of this water retention if the stress hormones go down. So you want to keep someone in a low stress state. You want to improve their sleep, and you want to lower their PUFA content, and then they could start to hopefully increase their metabolism. You want to increase their calcium and so on. So it could be a little bit difficult because if someone doesn't like dairy, doesn't like this or that. So, finding what works for each individual is key. Like, I had this one client that was eating like a lot of salmon per day, and he was also supplementing like 6 to 9 grams of fish oil.
Oh, man.
And he was like doing, I think it was like 1,500 calories.
Wow.
He was doing cardio on a daily basis, and he was doing weight training 3 days a week. And he was not losing fat. He was having a belly. And I told him, like, I remember what Pete spoke about, like these, he talked about people that were supplementing a lot of fish oil and their metabolism was like 1,500. They could maintain their weight on 1,500 calories. And I told this guy, like, you got to cut out your fish oils. You got to stop eating PUFAs. And he also had like depersonalization, derealization. So I was trying to help him with that as well. And, he didn't want to stop what he was doing. It was like smoking weed, which was also messing with most of his hormones and hunger hormones and stuff.
Speaking of depersonalization, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, man.
Yeah, exactly. I asked him, like, are you smoking pot? Because he said he did smoke in the past, and he never could have answered me back. So I was giving him supplements to help with depersonalization, but he just couldn't kick that pot habit. And anyway, so but basically he didn't want to stop the fish oils. He didn't want to stop eating his fish. And honestly, I don't know what happened to him, but he couldn't make any progress with fat loss. So truly, you have to cut out the polyunsaturated fats if you want to speed up your metabolism. It's going to slow down your metabolism. But for those skinny guys, you also want to focus on getting their androgens back up. Some of like DHT, lower their cortisol, and that will help with against the skinny fat. Like DHT is a dry steroid, so it can make you help look lean, more dry, vascular.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to shift that balance, higher DHT, lower cortisol, get the protein up, maybe start them slowly. Let's say do some walking, do something that's going to increase your body temperature. We also want to focus on increasing the body temperature. You don't necessarily have to exercise to lose fat, but let's look at your temperature. Let's look at your heart rate. Is that optimal? Most likely it's not optimal, and then you can benefit from improving thyroid function, maybe even supplement thyroid hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself will increase the metabolism. But most often guys that are skinny fat either have a lot of stored toxins, could be from cosmetics, plastics, or whatever the case may be, polyunsaturated fats, and they are stressing, they're not sleeping well. And it's something I wanted to mention, but I just forgot. It was important. Because the thing is, like, thyroid only speeds up your metabolism by like 200 to 300 calories.
Right.
Actually, it's much less than people actually think.
It's not
like
a huge,
if you look
so you're not going to go from 1,000 calories of more food immediately. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So often these guys, they say they're on a diet, they're strict, or this is what I'm eating, but they're not. Most often they're snacking on something. Maybe they're adding extra sauce.
Yeah, that's a common
Extra
one.
cheese.
Well, there was one donut at the office. I just had one donut. People shared it with everybody. It was one fucking donut, Hans. Why are you getting on me about it? Yeah, I know. It's like, it's not about you're not trying to be their daddy, right? You're just trying to like get them to be honest about it and to pay attention to what they're doing. And it's practice. It takes time. A lot of people, like you said, a lot of people just are on automatic mode, especially if they hate their job and they're not having a good time in life. I mean, yeah, man, they just have blinders on. You know what I mean? It's just like, and they're just, they're not noticing stuff like that, like you said. And yeah, I've had similar experiences with you, as you have. I wanted to ask you though about you brought up pot and depersonalization and all that. So what did you do? What sort of supplements did you recommend this guy for those sort of things?
I can't remember specifically because the thing is, he said he implemented them, but the communication with this guy was very, you ask him a question, but he's like very vague. He's avoiding it.
Yeah.
So there wasn't proper communication going on, and then there was just a question about, "Are you smoking pot?" He's not answering me.
Yeah.
Like
anyway,
3 questions
Hans,
in a row.
I had a great workout. You're like, hold on. Yeah, I get it, man. It happens. So there's
and then
something specific that you remember for those sort of problems that people have, because that is kind of a common problem that I've read about people have. Because I don't know what's the status of marijuana in South Africa, but in LA and California, it's completely legal now. So a lot of people are picking up the pot here and smoking it, and so a lot of those issues are happening with people.
Yeah. Typically, I would say it's related to, obviously, there's a lot of, you can't isolate it to only one neurotransmitter or hormone. That's the issue. Like, there's obviously, most likely involves the glutamate system. A lot of people that also have PSSD do have depersonalization or some kind of anhedonia, numbness. Then you get people that have used psychedelics that get some reminiscent symptoms of still being in some kind of psychedelic state, or they get depersonalized after using psychedelics, which indicates that also most likely involves the glutamate system. So honestly, I haven't really had a lot of clients with depersonalization yet. And like, there's typical things that you can recommend, like CBD, but then most people don't really respond all too well to CBD. Like they don't feel anything. Then there's upregulation of the NMDA receptor, or at least using NMDA receptor agonists, like for example, glycine, theanine, serine, sarcosine, could potentiate glutamate, and you can see how you feel on that. There's various herbs that you can use that upregulate the dopaminergic system. Let's say, for example, phenylpiracetam, that can increase dopamine synthesis as well as upregulate the dopamine receptors. But the whole thing is it's difficult to isolate just one neurotransmitter and say, let's upregulate this one.
Of course.
But what I like to focus on is that I like to take a whole approach. Like Pete likes to focus on the whole organism. Let's say you're getting hot flushes, and that's most likely hypothyroidism. So let's fix the thyroid. So if someone has some kind of brain disorder, most likely they will have defects in, like, some of the parts of the brain will be hypoactive and some parts will be hyperactive.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just basically restore proper energy metabolism in the brain,
Mm-hmm.
that should be able to slow down or increase those brain areas. And I actually have this one client that had exactly this hypoactivity and hyperactivity of certain brain regions. And since giving him a few supplements like vitamin B1, the Pyroset from Idea Labs, and a few other supplements that upregulate energy production,
Mm-hmm.
he is feeling a lot better. Those brain activities is basically stabilizing. So, you have to take a holistic or a whole approach to what is causing the issue. And it's most likely the glucose oxidation is insufficient. So let's try to fix the energy metabolism,
Mm-hmm.
and then everything will start to work better. And I try to take that approach on everything in the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the brain, it's also the intestine, it's the organs. That's why something like inosine, which upregulates ATP production and also the NAD to NADH ratio, can improve organ function. It's very organ protective. It can reduce leaky gut because it's increasing ATP and
Yeah.
upregulating NAD levels.
Well, it's great. It's not the answer that sometimes people want to hear, but that's the real answer, right? It's like, let's look at the whole picture here and see what's going on. Because a lot of times, a lot of those issues will just fix themselves too, right? If you just kind of do a few little things all around instead of just focusing on, okay, let's just zoom in on this. A lot of things tend to clear up. You mentioned CBD though. So what are your thoughts? I've experimented with it. I don't know. I've had experiences where, I felt a little less joint pain. The thing with CBD though, that I found is that, one, all the studies are doing very, very big doses. Like a lot of people will say, oh, just take 10 milligrams. And it's like, if you read the studies are all like 1,000 milligrams and up, so it's a huge doses of CBD, number one. And number two, that there are still trace amounts of THC in there. If you're having like a real CBD dose, a full spectrum, what they call. So people, if people are getting drug tested, they want to be careful of that because it might pop up. And I've had people tell me that they popped up just from taking some, very expensive CBD oil. But what has your experience been with CBD?
I haven't used it personally. There's a lot of like isolate products. There's not really a full spectrum like readily available unless you order it online. But typically it's very expensive. So
Yeah.
I just haven't thought like it's very effective. Like the main reason why people use it is to calm them against anxiety and also to help them sleep. And for me, it's like, okay, I have magnesium. It basically does the same thing. So I'm just going to use magnesium.
You have a bunch of
It's
other
a lot
things.
cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like one of the concerns that I have specifically is that and I don't know like if that's going to be specifically in all humans or actually been shown in humans, but it can downregulate the 1A serotonin receptor.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not something that you necessarily want. But, with talking to other people, they've basically reported that they haven't noticed any kind of like sexual side effects from using CBD.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's really much of a concern, though.
Yeah, I still think it's in its early stages. Although a lot of people in the, biohacking and all those sort of worlds, they're just all about it. They're loving their CBD and, yeah, I don't know, man. They always bring up the cannabinoid system, right? They're always like, oh, everybody, you should know about this system. And I don't know, have you done much research on the cannabinoid system in the body and all that?
Not too much. I just know it's linked to the 1A serotonin receptor. And it's basically involved in PSSD. So it is necessary for euphoria. That's why you smoke pot, you feel great.
Mm-hmm.
So it is necessary. But most of the CB1 agonists downregulate the receptor, make you feel. That's why you build a tolerance towards weed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you rather use a compound that inhibit the breakdown of endocannabinoids, you can increase the agonists, the natural agonists for the CB1 receptor without actually downregulating that receptor. So like PEA, that compound has been shown to basically inhibit that enzyme. So in terms of, I haven't really looked much into the endocannabinoid system. I'm more interested in things like the serotonin system. Although, all of these things are so interlinked, I just feel that, let's say you use large doses of CBD, why would you say CBD is better than just standard safe, very beneficial magnesium? You can just use magnesium to basically get the same effects.
Mm-hmm.
So as you said, like CBD is in its early stages of research, whereas for sure that magnesium is not going to cause you any issues. Like unless some people with PSSD might get additional numbness from using something like magnesium or zinc, because I think that it's specifically related to the glutamate system. Again, it blocks the NMDA receptor.
Yeah, or loose stool. I have gotten that when I've taken large amounts of magnesium for a couple of days there,
Yeah, yeah.
But again, that's not not like feeling losing your mind on taking too much CBD or pot or smoking too much pot or whatever. So what kind of magnesium are you into? Are you into like the sprays, or do you have a particular chelate that you like?
Yeah, I specifically currently am using the magnesium glycinate or biglycinate from Dr. Best. I feel that one is kind of like a really good one. Then there's also magnesium malate that's got really good absorption. I like the magnesium threonate. So those basically would be my three favorite ones to use. But just one word on the cannabinoid system.
Yeah.
One compound that I'm interested in is the CBG. That has the potential to really be helpful for people with, it boosts energy compared to CBD, which makes you more calm. So I think like a CBG-CBD mix could be really helpful for keeping you calm, but not making you feel sedated. So that's one compound that I find very interesting because it also has like anti-noradrenaline or stress response functions. It can also increase dopamine. So it has a lot of variety of different beneficial effects.
Yeah. CBD is just one that they're kind of focusing on. I mean, people are not realizing that there's a lot of other cannabinoids in marijuana, and so or cannabis. So it's gonna take time, I think, before people really see the full picture. So I don't know. I tend to kind of not be the first one to experiment with random stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Agreed, man. Agreed.
And as far as magnesium goes, I mean, so do you take it regularly? Because in the Ray Pete world, I don't think he's a big fan of supplementing too much magnesium, right? Because he thinks it's a thyroid kind of function that regulates that. How do you go about it?
I've actually experimented. I've also used Magnoil from Idea Labs, specifically on my shoulder, which was hurting, on when I hurt my forearm. I think it worked. Like, I can't say I really felt much mental effects from Magnoil, but I'm sure the absorption is good. I think I did feel some pain relief actions, but I've actually never really felt much from supplementing magnesium specifically. So I'm not an avid user of it, but I know it works very well against anxiety and depression. But when I might, for example, have some kind of a stressor, I feel off, I might use my anti-serotonin stack, which is basically the sodium salicylate combined with magnesium and vitamin B1. So that very effectively blocks any kind of stress response and get you back to normal. So sometimes the stress response can keep you in a low for a long time. And with that stack, I found like it brings you right back, like especially when you combine the sodium salicylate with the magnesium, because like sodium salicylate has been shown to enhance the retention of magnesium in the body, like because it works in a similar function to thyroid. It enhances thyroid uptake in cells. So that's very neat. And I felt that once you get that uncoupling effect from the sodium salicylate, you always also start to feel better, because once your temperature starts to drop, you might start to feel a little bit more depressed, a little bit more anxious. Once you get your temperature back up, you start to feel great again. So just a simple hack like the sodium salicylate combined with magnesium B1 restores energy metabolism, blocks the stress. That's basically how I use it occasionally, very occasionally.
Okay. And then as far as you're talking about temperatures and people should read who aren't familiar with that sort of stuff, they should definitely read Ray Pete's work. But working with people, you're always trying to get their temperature up. Well, not always, but you know what I'm saying. If their temperatures are low, you're trying to get their temperatures up. What sort of things you have found over time that do very good? I mean, very well. Sorry. What things bring the temperatures up that you found, and what things don't work?
Well, sometimes you have to find some of the most thermogenic compounds that I always reside to is protein mixed. Honestly, I found that starches do work better than fruit for enhancing your temperature, and that could be related to liquid, because liquids can have more of a cooling effect. So I have not experimented with more of a starchy fruit like a banana or a papaya and a mango compared to apple or orange juice. I think there might also be differences between different kinds of fruits in terms of temperature. So in terms of heat, protein always on top combined with salt, that's almost guaranteed to make you feel hot. Combine that with some caffeine, like an espresso with cream, or just a normal coffee, a strong coffee with cream, an extra boost, add in some aspirin, and you're going to be uncoupling like crazy. So that's the thermogenic combo that I use. But again, that's not a long-term solution. Oftentimes, you have to find the root. What is inhibiting thyroid function from working normally? And again, it comes down to the gut. It most often is related to gut function. You're getting an immune response. Your body is forming antibodies against the thyroid. The inflammation is stopping the thyroid from working properly. So if you can calm the gut down, if you can stop the immune system from overreacting, you can slowly get your thyroid back to normal. So in the meantime, you can use things like make sure your protein intake is sufficient, make sure your calcium intake is sufficient. That's also very important. Balance the calcium with the phosphorus. Make sure you replenish your micronutrients. That's very important. But that takes a long time of eating foods that is not irritating your gut. So like you might be on an elimination diet, eating very few foods that's not irritating your gut, and you might feel you're like you're making no progress. But after a few months, suddenly you start to feel better. It's like, okay, this is working. Like sometimes, you go through that plateau, and then suddenly you start to feel better.
It takes time.
So that
It's funny you mentioned starches though, because again, in the repeat world, starches is like, you don't want to have too many of them. But yeah, working with people, and a lot of people just really do crave starch, and they do feel good after a good meal of potatoes and butter and, some sort of protein in there. So you've had that experiences with clients that just have fruits and they don't quite have the same effect, where starches have a better effect on them, huh?
Yeah, and that's always like vice versa. Like most often, if someone is have low temperature, I would ask them if they would be okay with supplementing a thyroid. Let's say you would start with an NDT, or if you want to try like a more isolated, like only T4, T3. If they're not okay, if they don't want to do that, they want to do something natural, then we can do a different mechanism. So some people can tolerate thyroid, some people can't. So if you can use thyroid, that can speed up the process. So if someone can use thyroid, that can help to upregulate the temperature, then they might do better with a lower starch diet if they can upregulate the thyroid with thyroid, the temperature. But if they don't want to use thyroid, and this is so person specific, like some people do crave starches over food. It's just like, I guess, in their genetics, where they grew up, it's just what they crave. So, and you shouldn't deprive someone of a food they crave if they don't get a negative reaction from it.
Of course.
Like even grains that is so highly problematic for most people could be therapeutic for some people.
Totally. So as far as thyroid supplementation goes, how do you go about that? So you mentioned NDT, so natural desiccated thyroid. Are you supplement regularly? Are you a daily kind of thyroid person, or you just kind of do it in periods of stress? What's your way of taking it?
I have only recently really tried thyroid myself. I've always found like my heart rate, my temperature has always been optimal, except when I was going through a stressful period and there was like a lot of stress going on. But it felt like I have relatively recovered my temperature quickly, but I've felt more that I remain sensitive to stress. That's been kind of like my problem. So I didn't really feel the need to supplement thyroid to up my temperature. That was always pretty normal. And so lately we had some T3, thyroid mix left. So I was thinking in terms of what Pete was talking about. Some people sleep better when they take thyroid before bed. So I'm going to try some thyroid sublingually right before bed. And I definitely felt that initially it made me fall asleep faster and enhanced the depth, the sleep quality. But then it just kind of like, I would say I kind of like maintained those benefits even though I stopped. So I think I used that for about 2 weeks. And then I finished the container, so I had stopped, and I didn't buy any new ones. And I just felt like my sleep is really good at the moment because I was added some ornithine and bone broth before bed, and I feel that I don't need any thyroid or any other sleep enhancement agent since I've been doing that.
Yeah, some warm bone broth or some warm milk, it really does the job for a lot of people, I think, right?
Yeah. Initially, when I actually had sleep problems, I would take aspirin, and that really helped. Like if you look at the research, aspirin seemed to prevent proper sleep for people. It's not recommended before bed, but I've always found that it very reliably stopped the stress response and allowed me to sleep through the night. So sometimes when I was still recovering metabolically, I would wake up with really like hot flushes. I was like mad. I was like really angry. And then I would have some milk and sugar and take some aspirin. I would like really calm down. I feel my temperature dropping again. Not in a bad way, like in a way like I'm going to go back to bed now. And I would sleep peacefully again. So that's basically what I've used instead of thyroid. I felt like that's been much more reliable for me. But in terms of my clients, I would start them at the minimal dose. Let's start with 1 grain in the morning and see how you do. And how is that increasing your temperature, and for how long is it increasing your temperature? And then based on the response, we can increase the dose. We could add a second dose. We can add a third dose. If the NDT is not working, we might try the isolated thyroid hormones, which has also actually happened. For some reason, but people just don't like absorb the thyroid hormones in the NDT. Right. They do much better when supplementing the isolated thyroid hormones. And sometimes, if someone is in really bad, stressful situation, they might benefit from T3 monotherapy. So it's very individual. I try to start really minimalistic, and then modify the treatment based on treatment sounds bad, but the protocol. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, you gotta take whereas a lot of people just jump right in, and I'm all about taking the smallest possible dose, maybe even half of that smallest possible dose. So you haven't messed around with the Mexican supplements that are so popular in the repeat world, right? Like Sinoplus and Sinomel and all those.
No, because we're in South Africa, I don't even know if they can ship to South Africa,
and it would take
I don't know
1 year probably before they get there. So yeah.
Yeah, so I just feel like, you can get it from Idea Labs. It's really good quality. I know what I'm getting, so I'm just going to support the man.
Yeah, shout out to George Dinkoff. He's been on the podcast. He's a great guy. And you also brought up serotonin a little while back, which is, again, a huge topic, and there's a lot to say about it. And you have a great article about it. And how long ago did you write that article?
I have a few. I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
I'm sorry. I think it was top maybe 60 ways to lower serotonin.
Yeah, that was basically,
years ago.
2018, 17. Yeah, it was a while ago.
Cool. So, that's what I was going to ask you. So now, a few years later, I mean, if you had to narrow it down to a few real big ones that are, turn big rocks over to do that, what would they be?
Basically, my anti-serotonin stack that I've recently wrote about, which is the combination of aspirin, magnesium, and vitamin B1. I feel that instead of targeting the serotonin system directly, let's just target what is universally wrong with the person. Serotonin is dysregulated for a reason. And if serotonin is dysregulated, then so are almost every other neurotransmitter in your brain. And basically, if you can restore cellular function in the brain with piracetam, and you can restore energy metabolism with, let's say, ethyl pyruvate, then you can help to rebalance all your neurotransmitters. So let's say, for example, your cell is in an unhealthy state, it's not properly energized, the cell is too fluid or too rigid or whatever the case may be. Then you take some piracetam and it kind of stabilizes the cell. It improves the cellular function. And once a cell is in an optimal state, it can respond to a neurotransmitter in a proper way. So let's say a cell becomes dysfunctional, I can guarantee you that cell will respond differently to the same neurotransmitter than when it's in a hyperexcited state or in a normal state. So just by modifying the cellular function or state, you can modify how a neurotransmitter is reacting to that cell. So that's basically piracetam helps a lot with that. And then just once you have improved the cellular environment, you can increase glucose oxidation. And that will regulate in itself the synthesis of many neurotransmitters. So you don't have to specifically focus on. So my approach is let's restore energy metabolism first, and then let's see how you improve, and then when you stall. And if you stall, let's look at your symptoms, and then we can address that specifically. So I wouldn't say I'm always directly addressing serotonin or directly addressing dopamine, although I do recommend dopaminergics a lot. And obviously something like cyproheptadine can be life-saving for people that are in a very bad state, that's for sure. But I don't necessarily jump right onto those supplements. I would rather say let's stop the inflammation, let's stop the gut irritation, let's stop this whole stress response that is on the snowball effect. If we can stop this, like Peter's actually spoken about you can take one dose of progesterone just to stop that stress response. And then your body has the opportunity to recover. So that's my approach, is let's just stop the stress response and see what happens. And if there's anything really needed after that, let's take some specific measurements for that.
So perhaps start with a diet first, right? Because that's just going to irritate
exactly.
you, which is, it's going to irritate your gut. So take out some of the things. What are the most common things that people have problems with? I mean, is it though the grains thing? Is it the starches, you think? Or is it just PUFA, obviously, people just eating a lot of crap? I mean, what are the most, people, how about for people who are sort of in the loop, they've been trying to get their health back together and they're kind of, read some biohacking blogs and read your blog and maybe seen a thing or two. And, what are the most common things that you find that, you tell people to take out? Like one thing, like I said, for me, definitely still, it is the breads, the gluten, the kind of all those, everybody focuses on gluten, but there's other things in there like gliadin, etc. But, those sort of things do seem to make people just, their guts calm down and relax like really fast, more than anything else.
Yeah. Like I like to start someone, there's a variety of different ways that you can, try to pinpoint which food is problematic for you. But the problem I find is that people like to have various foods in their diet. Like they like each dinner to be different.
Yeah.
So, it's very difficult to pinpoint which food is gut irritating.
Man, that's so true. It's so true. So many people I can't eat the same thing every day. And it's like, Jesus, just give me 5 days, try it out, right? Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. But some people are just, they can't have the same thing every day. I had a girlfriend like that one that was like, literally, she can't eat the same food, not even the same food for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It all has to be different every day. And it was just like, Jesus. Sorry to interrupt you there, bro. So
yeah, man.
So what do you do? What do you do with people like that?
So Pete likes the approach where you eliminate one food group for a week, and then if you improve, then you eliminate that food permanently. But if you don't improve, you can add that food back. It's most likely not irritating your gut. But I feel that I like to be extreme. Let's eliminate all foods, calm the immune system completely, and then we can reintroduce foods and see which one you react negatively to. So it's most likely going to be grains is a problem, but people really are addicted to bread. So, if I want to have some bread, let's have some sourdough. That's kind of like the safest bread you can have, depending on the sensitivity of the person. Then I also make them aware of the FODMAP, high FODMAP foods. So it can be something simple like an apple, a pear, asparagus, artichoke. And then it's not just specifically a FODMAP, but it could be any fiber in general, which could be like if your intestine is not in a healthy state, then any fiber could be an issue. Like, yes, obviously some fiber might be like, let's say a carrot or a mushroom or a bamboo shoot could be beneficial. It could help you. Like I found that desiccated coconut actually helped to speed up my intestine, but so therapeutically or short term, that can be beneficial. Okay, but so back to the foods. Like I would say, let's say beans, legumes is also a problematic one. Like even since I sorted out all my gut issues, I would actually the other day I wanted to have some legumes, and immediately it kind of like irritated my gut. I got some bloating, I got some loose stools going on, and once I cut it out, cleared up.
Yeah, man, the same thing. I mean, I live in LA. There's a lot of Mexican food here, and I love Mexican food, but. Yeah, it's true. The same, like some refried beans, The other big problem with those sort of legumes, though, like if you buy them at a restaurant or, a taco stand or whatever, they're always fried in awful vegetable oils, So you always do better if you can cook them at home. But even cooking them at home, man, me too. Like I'll eat them and I just feel like I just ate a baby, like I'm a pregnant and I just feel like, ugh, and yeah, man. Those, like I like the taste. It's funny though, right? Like, cause it sounds like you do too, right? You like the taste of some good some beans. Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's funny. Like sometimes I was just like, man, I want some like legume soup. I want some lentil soup. Like crave lentil soup. I don't know why. But then I have like one meal. I think one meal, and I'm like, okay, I'm over it. And then I have some loose stool, and then so that's basically
yeah.
That's another approach. Is that the reason I like to be extreme is that you eliminate all the problematic foods, you completely calm down the inflammation, you get perfect bowel movement, you get ghost wipes, you get 2 to 3 bowel movements a day. That's basically the baseline that you want to be at. And from that baseline, you can much better analyze which food is going to cause you an issue. Because if your bowel health is not in an optimal state, you are going to have some trouble identifying which food is going to be gut irritating. And even though some people think like, oh, my bowel movements are okay, once they eliminate some foods, like, okay, wow, I'm surprised like how good my bowel movements actually are now. And my bowels were actually not as good as I thought they were. So even if you think it's good, it can not be good. And let's say someone routinely gets a bowel movement every morning. They think like my transit time is fast, but then you swallow some activated charcoal and it comes out 5 days later. It's like, no, you do not have a good transit time.
Yeah.
So then you know that there's something gut irritating, and that's basically what happened with potatoes for me. Is that it? Potatoes. Like I was eating like 1.5 kilograms of potatoes, so that was giving me a fair amount of fiber, like 40, I think 50 grams of fiber, which is a good amount. And some people would think like, oh, your gut should be in a really good place with all that fiber. But once I eliminated like the potatoes and the fiber, I did a 0 fiber, 0 starch experiment. And I started getting 2 bowel movements a day, and it was much better. So actually my transit time sped up when I eliminated fiber and was having just dairy and fruit. And that just shows like you don't need fiber for optimal transit time. It's actually been backed up by science as well.
Yeah.
So
it seems to be the latest thing, though. I mean, people are still another thing to talk about indoctrination. Another thing where people are so like, you need more fiber. You need more fiber. I mean, some of the lower carb kind of doctors, they recommend having like 50 to 100 grams of fiber a day, which is crazy. I think that's fucking so crazy. Sorry, I'm just gonna say, it's fucking crazy. I mean, that's so much fiber. And yeah, my experience with clients has been also where you give them to that amount of huge of fiber, they actually start feeling more constipated, or they have, what people call the runs or whatever, they're just always running to the bathroom, and not in a good way. It's not like a pleasurable, like, oh, I'm going to go take a shit, So yeah, man.
Yeah. And also like I had this one client that he was eating salads, which is thought to be healthy. And I was telling him like, okay, if your gut is not in a healthy place, most of that fiber or some of those food will be undigested. It will, undigested food is not a good thing. So that's going to reach your colon. The bacteria is going to ferment. You're going to start to feel bad. So then he eliminated the salad. And then a few days later, he was like, man, you were right. I'm feeling a lot better just from just cutting out a salad, which is supposed to be healthy. And, there's so much other things that you can look into. For example, why is a certain food causing issues for some people? Like, are you having protein with starches? Just by having monomeals, you're only having starches could solve your problem. Just by having meat alone can solve your problem. So let's say you're not specifically eating a gut irritating food, but the combination of various foods could be an issue for you because you need more stomach acid to digest the meat, and the starches can be digested at a less acidic pH. So
it's probably a tell also of just not optimal gut health, right? If they eat any combination of food, because there's a lot of those people, they just eat a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they just, oh, I'm bloated. Like, and it's probably, it's not only that the food is maybe not optimal for you. It seems like, your gut health is not in a good place right now. Because to me, again, it's like, if you're doing well, everything's feeling good, you'll eat some beans and you'll be maybe a little bloated, but it'll go through you. Boom, you're on to the next thing. You're feeling better, kind of. That's where I'm always trying to get to, where it's like, yes, you want to eat great foods and optimal foods, but if you have a little, pizza here and there, like, you're not ruined by it for 2 to 3 days, right? Like a lot of people are, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I found, that, people are afraid of elimination diets because, they think they're never going to be able to eat the food that they love. And what I've found is that the better I've taken care of my gut, the less I'm affected by these problematic foods. So initially, you might eat a pizza and your bowels might be chaotic for about 3 to 4 days. But now, when I have like something different, let's say I have eaten lentils and I have some loose stool, the next afternoon, I'm back to normal. I'm having no issues at all. So your recovery is so much faster. It's not affecting you as badly at all.
Yeah, it's important. It's important to get back to it. So, and well, let's talk about training a little bit again. So, what's your training like then? Do you, how many times a week do you train? What are your basic thoughts and just, overall fitness kind of lifestyle?
Yeah.
I'm guessing lots of cardio and fasting, right? I'm kidding.
Yeah, man. Don't forget that intermittent fasting. Awful stuff. I was actually looking at some photos, me and my wife, the other day, and I have a photo where I was doing. I tried the warrior diet. That's like basically one meal a
Yeah, of
day.
course. Yeah. Do you know who Kyle Mamunis is? I don't know if you know. He's kind of a
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
he might have been a prolific poster on Ray Pete's forum, but yeah, him and I did a whole podcast just on that book actually, because him and I both have tried it and we've talked a lot about it. So yeah, so I know about it.
Yeah. So I was doing it, and I was trying to cut. So that was kind of like my also a big mistake because I was reducing calories. I wasn't doing a huge fast. I was doing faster training. So that was a mistake. So I think it was about after, let's say, 4 weeks, I was looking like lean. I was looking good. I was looking muscular. And then here by the third month, I was looking flat. I was losing muscle. I was losing strength. I was plateauing like crazy. So that was just a disaster. So that was just a fun story. Anyway.
Been there, done that, brother.
Yeah, man. And I was so bloated, but I was like having this ginormous meal, like post training, and he was so hungry and low energy. It was just terrible.
It's like at the end of the day, again, too, you could have the best diet and your body will adjust to it, and you can have the worst diet and your body might adjust to it too, and you might be okay, and I think the best way to look at it is that overall long-term picture, because yeah, I do know some people that they'll have a glass of milk in the morning with some coffee and they won't eat anything, and they'll have that giant ass meal in the evening and they look good, and they're fine, But to me, it's like, I don't know. Do you really want to like not eat? Is it like that important? If you feel better about yourself, that's great. But I don't know. Like, I want to be able to wake up and, go have breakfast with my girlfriend, like, no problem. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to be this, no, I'm the warrior diet. I don't want to I can't eat until 6 p.m. today because I'm a warrior, and it's just like, I don't know. Your body will adjust, but a lot of people also don't do well on those sort of diets either. So, at the end of the day, it's like, if it's not working, it's not working. And if it is, sure. But, you got to look at the whole picture. So sorry, brother. So,
I agree.
Yeah. So when you were doing the warrior diet, what's your training look like in those days?
Yeesh, I was doing a reverse pyramid, training, which is a good style of periodization. And then I was doing a more like a high volume, shorter rest style secondary exercise or two after that. So I think I was doing like a bro split at the time.
Okay.
And
like chest
actually
and
back
back,
then I started
butt, buys and tries, legs, kind of thing like that. You just rotate 3 days or what?
No, bro split is basically chest, back, shoulders. You do it one muscle group per day.
Okay. All right.
So that was basically like the program I started with Michael Hearn. It was like a bro split, and I kind of liked it, but my training's just completely changed. So back then I actually started incorporating some calisthenics like pistol squats, handstand, shoulder press, one-arm push-ups, and those kind of stuff, because I always wanted to be, functional in both my body weight and with weights. I thought like I want to be a strength athlete, but I want to be, if you look at guys that do calisthenics, they can't lift a lot of weight, and you look at weightlifters, they're not good at calisthenics, and I wanted to be both.
Yep.
So I always wanted to incorporate those two. So currently, that's basically what my training is all about. I think a major misconception is that people think you can't build a lot of muscle with calisthenics, but have someone try a front lever or a back lever. They're not going to be able to do it.
Just look at gymnasts, and yes, they are genetically elite usually, but even the amateur ones, they have quite a bit of muscle. It's just about progressing the complexity. It's, of course, if doing 100 pull-ups for you, because at first 100 pull-ups is a lot, but eventually 100 pull-ups is kind of like, okay, I can do it. Like, that's not a crazy workout. And so from there, naturally people just think, okay, I should do 150, 200, 300. Yes, you could do that, and that's one way to progress it. But you could also, like you said, go from pull-ups to doing a front lever, right? And that's a much more complicated exercise, which is also for the back, but it's involves a lot more complexity, and so your muscle fibers are getting hit in a new way, and yada, yada, yada. So
yeah, it's a very compound movement. It involves all body. And I think a major thing that people overlook is like, it doesn't look like a normal exercise that you do for back. But if you look at it, the function of the lat is basically to pull your arm down.
Right.
That's what you're doing with the front lever. You're engaging the whole lat. It's one of the best lat exercises that you can basically do.
Exactly. Yeah, man. Which
Um,
is funny because it's people always when people see the front lever, they always think it's a core exercise, and it's like it's 99.999% back. It's not even nobody has a problem holding their legs straight. You know what I'm saying? It's more the lats that give out. So yeah, I'm a big fan of front levers and back levers and all those sort of things. So who got you into calisthenics? Did you start up looking up like Hannibal for King, or do you remember those sort of guys? I don't know if you did.
Funny enough, yeah, I did. Like,
There you go. Great.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I feel that calisthenics in itself is inadequate. That's why you mentioned, like, you get a gymnast, he's going to do 300 pull-ups. That's not the best way to go about hypertrophy. You have to add weight to make an exercise more difficult. So either you're going to do a front lever or you're going to add weight around your waist to do chin-ups. You have to overload the movement to get hypertrophy.
Yeah.
So I'm basically combining calisthenics and weight training, and where I cannot do, like, let's say I do push-ups. I don't do bench press. I do push-ups on rings, and then I add a resistance band around my back as well. So that gives me a variable resistance to overload the top side of the movement as well. And then I put a weight belt around my back and hang some weights down. So that way I can.
So you have a lot of complexity going on, and you have some intensity going on there because you have a lot of weight, and you have the 360, instability of the rings. So you have a lot of stuff happening there. So that's a tough movement.
Exactly.
Man.
Yeah, and like anyone can do a push-up. Like if I do a push-up on the floor, I can bang out like 50 reps or more. Like, but if you do it on rings, you're gonna get like 10 or 15. It's a lot more complex. So I feel with an unstable environment like on the rings, you have more muscle recruitments going on, so you get a better strength overall and less possibility of getting an injury. And you're just getting stronger overall on a unstable environment. You're releasing more hormones when you're doing the exercise. So I try to limit myself to 10 reps only. And when I can do more than that, I try to add more weight or make the exercise more complicated. So with the front lever, that's basically easy. You start with the top front lever, then you go to the advanced stock, the super advanced stock, to the full front lever. So it's easy to overload the movement without adding weight. But when it comes to chest, you have to be clever. What you're going to do is, like, I love to do the wide grip chest dips on the rings. And I also use the resistance band, overload the top side, and then I hang a weight around the midsection to overload as well. Because, soon you are going to get strong enough on the rings that your body weight's not going to be a challenge anymore. And even if you're going to use a resistance band, you're still underloading the weak side of the muscle. Like at the bottom of the dip, that's where you're the weakest. So you can only use weight to match your weak point. So with a resistance band, you are overloading your strong point as well. Like in the top of the dip, you're not being challenged by the weight that you're using unless you're using a resistance band.
Right.
So add the weight around the midsection, add the resistance band, at the unstable environment that you're training in, and you're getting a phenomenal stimulation on the muscle.
Yeah. So you kind of evolved to, using weights and calisthenics, yeah? And then as far as leg training, do you do back squats, pistol squats?
I I do mostly Bulgarian split squats and front squats.
Okay.
Those are basically my favorite. And I also try to use the resistance band because, again, you're strongest at the top of the movement. The weight is not overloading the strong point of the muscle.
Pretty, but just those like 4 movements that we just covered, it's like they can build a lot of muscle for a person, right? And you can progress them almost, infinitely, right? You can just keep going with the same thing. Just put a heavier weight on, put a heavier band on, or raise your legs up a little higher, a little lower, so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. I try to hit all muscle groups. So I'm currently doing a full body split 3 days a week, where I am doing a chest, I'm doing back, I'm doing shoulders, and then I'm hitting my arms, and then I'm doing legs, calves, and I'm doing some pike pulses as well to progress into the V sit. I'm doing it the L sit, but I want to go to the V sit. So
big boy, you want to do the real thing. Attaboy, nice, man.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
I just feel like weight training is just like this parasite in the minds of people, and that's it. It's been a parasite in my mind as well, because if you ask someone, do you want to be strong in a push-up doing it on rings,
Mm-hmm.
or do you want to strong at the bench? Like, why do you want to be strong at the bench and not the rings? Because you can measure it with other people. It's egotistical.
Yeah, it's
Like,
just a
even
dick
though
measuring contest, as I call it. Yeah, that's all that
exactly,
it
like,
is. Yeah.
so what if I tell you that if you do it on rings the way I do it is superior to the way you do it in the gym?
Mhm.
Will you be interested because it is superior? And a lot
Yeah.
of guys would basically say no, because I can't measure my progress to the progress of the standard bodybuilders out there.
Yes. Yes.
So that's why I feel like people are stuck with this idea that there is only one way to build muscle.
Yeah.
And there are actually superior ways that you can build muscle, but you can't measure it to other people.
It doesn't look
because
as cool. Yeah, because you can't say like I bench 225 for 8 or whatever the fuck it is, and it's like, although
Yeah,
I've had
exactly.
experiences, where you take like a bodybuilder guy who's never been on rings and can bench press a lot. I've done that multiple times to guys, and I'll say, let's do some ring dips, and they're like, yeah, I'll do dips all the time, and then they get on rings and they start shaking, like a little chihuahua kind of quivering, you know what I mean? And they just can't, and they're like, but it's awesome though, because I'm not trying to make them feel bad, but I've had many times where guys were like, oh my god, I'm gonna start using these, because it's like, wow, I didn't know that I was so fucking weak, that in reality they just built up this strength to just move from point A to point B, but when it comes to moving their body around an anchor point, it's a complete different, game. And the funny thing is that, I don't know if you ever been in the forest, but I've never seen anybody laying on their back and just picking up a rock off the floor. No, you're always doing it in a different sort of environment. So it's kind of a, if you really think about it, it's kind of a useless exercise. I don't know if it's useless, but I definitely think the bench press is so overrated. I mean, I think it might be the most overrated exercise in the gym. You know what I'm saying? Just a traditional, just, up point A to point B, but, power lifters do it and people look cool. So, that's why people
Yeah,
do
yeah,
it.
I totally agree. It's so unnatural. Your shoulders are totally back. Your back is arched. You're locked in this position. In what way is this normal? It's not normal.
Yeah.
Like, what is normal is a push-up. That's the way you get up from the floor. Is you do a
Yeah.
push-up. Your scapulas are more neutral, and everything is just like the way it should be. So if you can strengthen that exercise,
Mhm.
it's vastly superior than doing a bench press.
Yeah. If you do love moving weight, I mean, I do think that the overhead press is much more superior to the bench press, and much more functional type of thing, because again, you're just taking a weight and you're moving it over your head. And that's very important, because you can't do that unless, like, if your core is not in order, you know what I'm saying? If you have a very weak midsection, if you have bad shoulder mobility, if your back is all fucked up and weak, you're just not going to be able to put up a lot of weight over your head, and if you have all those things in order, that's where you see the difference between people. It's not even so much just deltoid and tricep strength. It's more so that they have their whole body kind of integrated. And when they go up to pressing over their head, they're strong, and people who don't have those things happening are very weak in that exercise.
Yeah, exactly. That's like that. There was a study comparing like those kind of compound movements, like squat, deadlift, and this overhead pressing with either like a military press or doing it with one arm, and comparing that to isolation core exercises, and found that like the core development of those guys that were doing the compound movements was way better than the guys that were doing the isolation movement. So if you're doing like compound movements like the military press, why would you even consider doing isolation movements for the abs? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, even if you're doing calisthenics, if you're doing a front lever, you don't have to isolate training your abs. Your abs is getting like all the stimulus that it needs.
Yeah, they're getting worked, although it's still a back exercise. But you're getting
Yeah,
worked.
true.
It's getting worked. It's getting worked. But hey, I mean, just a classic. I mean, the best, if there's one to choose for the abs, it's just hanging leg raises. Can you hang from a bar and reach your legs up to the bar? And you'd be surprised. A lot of people that are strong and they just can't do it. They can only go about 90 degrees up and they have to swing back down, and that's just a classic great movement that all gymnasts do, and you don't need a lot of it. 3 sets of 10 and you're good to go. There's your ab workout for the day. That's plenty, and it'll make you strong too, and it'll also help support your front lever a little bit, because you're still getting a little bit of that stability from hanging over the bar.
Yeah. I guess what's influencing my core training the most is basically that I hate training abs. I just hate it.
Don't we all? I'm with you on that, brother. Oh, that's
Yeah.
funny, man. I do it, but I'm with you. It's boring, right? And it's not fun. It's not as fun as, like you said, doing a dip and feeling yourself, fucking hanging on the rings and stabilizing your body. It's just like, all right, let's do some sit-ups. Yay.
Yeah, but
But if you do want to lean
yeah.
out, I mean, how do you go about it? Like, let's say I tell you, Hans, you got a competition in 3 months, bodybuilding competition. I don't know if you've ever done one, but I just mean that, and you want to lean out. How would you go about it? Do you just simply just cut your calories down, and what's your like step one? What's the first thing you do?
Yeah, I would drop my calories. I think that's the first thing I do. I would keep training mostly the same. I would make sure I'm still lifting heavy because that's the best way you're going to maintain your muscle mass.
Hmm.
And just keep my protein high, cut the calories. I wouldn't necessarily add additional cardio. Like I wouldn't go train cardio. What I would do is I would rather go for a walk on the beach. I would swim in the ocean because that way you're active, but you're not overexerting yourself. And like you're taking away, if you're overexerting yourself, you're taking away from your metabolism.
Hmm.
But if you're having fun and you're exerting energy that way, you are giving to your metabolism instead of taking away. So there's a
Yeah.
difference between hating the cardio that you do versus really enjoying the cardio that you do. So I wouldn't be specifically going to do cardio. I would rather cut my calories first, try to minimize stress as best as possible.
Hmm.
But in terms of having abs for a competition, like maybe it's just me specifically, but I've always done squats, deadlifts, chins, overhead presses, and I've always had great ab development. I've never had to do specific core training.
Hmm.
And since doing calisthenics, my ab development is just like like intensified, like in crazy. Well, like with the your serratus and everything, like
Yeah.
the obliques, like all the development, because you are using your whole core when you're doing calisthenics, and it's not easy. It's definitely a difficult way of training your core,
Hmm.
and
But it hits those.
so
They call them. What do they call them? Dick gutters. Those little gutters that go to your dick. But anyway, but I know what you mean. Yeah, it definitely gets. I mean, hey, after a good, for me, it's front squats. After a good front squat workout, not even going crazy heavy, but just really pushing myself. My abs are smoked the next day. I always feel it in my back, in my midsection a lot. Like after front, and even sometimes back squat. You know what I'm saying? Because your body again has to be in order to keep your body upright. If you're squatting correctly, if you're not squatting like a 350-pound powerlifter whale kind of guy, like bent over. I'm talking about like a real good quality Olympic squat. No offense to the powerlifters out there, but you know what I'm saying. It's different.
yeah. Yeah, I should add, like, another thing with traditional training is that I feel like since I've switched to the way that I'm currently training, which is only like 3 days a week,
Mhm.
I feel that I've really boosted my metabolism where I'm eating the same amount of calories, but I am dropping weight or specifically fat. I'm leaning out like at a surprisingly fast rate.
Mm.
Whereas with traditional training where you're doing 45 to 60 minutes in the gym, I feel like that is not adding to your metabolism. It's actually
Mm.
subtracting. You need a lot of nutrients to recover. You have a lot more of muscle damage going on. So you have more intracellular cortisol. You might have a little bit more water retention depending on the health of the individual, of course.
Hmm.
So since switching to this style of training, your recovery is just so much better. And the way that I'm doing my workout, I'm getting crazy hormonal releases, and that is adding to my metabolism instead of subtracting. So I'm doing less, but I'm getting much better results in the process. I'm just really feeling like I've this the style of training is increasing the metabolism, whereas with traditional weight training, it's maintaining the metabolism and even subtracting from the metabolism.
Yeah, and why not, right? Why not do less and get more out of it? I mean, it's just it makes sense. You know what I'm saying? It's just because yeah, a lot of people do have it in their head that it's like you got to go every fucking day, six days a week. You got to kill yourself, and really doesn't have to be that way, right? It doesn't have to be too complicated.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to go in. You have to stimulate the muscle sufficiently
Hmm.
without causing too much damage. You just have to stimulate that muscle protein synthesis
Hmm.
process, get out of the gym, let the recovery take place, and you will grow all the muscle you need.
Yeah. So, are you a fan of like sports nutrition kind of recovery stuff of like having a whey protein shake or a casein shake or whatever, or do you just kind of still follow your general nutrition principles around your training?
I just do 1 liter of milk, so that gives me 30 grams of protein, which has been shown to sufficiently stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And since milk is a combination between whey and casein, I will have a sustained release of amino acids into my bloodstream. So I always have a pre-workout and a post-workout. So I am basically always saturated with essential amino acids to stimulate muscle hypertrophy. And then I'm basically always sipping on milk during the day. So I'm really having essential amino acids in my blood all day long.
Yeah.
I'm never going through these cycles. I'm just like, this might sound like a bad thing for most people. Like, if you're having food every hour, how can you be lean? When do you burn fat? But I can easily go quite a couple of hours without food. If we go to the beach, I'm never hungry. I don't get tired. I can go hours without food, but I just like to continue to just sip on milk, saturate my system. And there's obviously some foods that have been shown to boost recovery, boost your muscle protein synthesis. Things like bone broth or gelatin specifically. Eggs are great for that purpose. Milk as well. Even cacao, but maybe not as much. Like that specific compound is the epicatechin or something called like that. Have been shown to increase follistatin.
Yeah.
So that will help you
I've
to.
seen mixed studies with cacao. I've mixed. I don't know. I never. I just, like you said, I just kind of go, if you like it, okay. Just don't go crazy with it. I mean, I don't think anybody does crazy amounts of it yet. I haven't seen it yet, but maybe there's a biohacker out there doing it. So you just keep it simple, huh? You don't, and it's so much cheaper, right? Like, instead of buying these super expensive organic grass-fed whey protein blah blah blah, which I've done back in my days. I've purchased all those super expensive supplements, but it's like just a cheap glass of milk, right, or a couple glasses of milk. So you think it'll do the job post-workout, and you just do just fine with that, huh?
Yeah, definitely, because you're getting 30 grams of protein, you're getting 50 grams of carbohydrates, and that is sufficient to stimulate, increase your insulin, replenish your glycogen stores. And so like an hour or so or two later, I'm having more milk. So that's additional carbohydrates and protein, and that will be sufficient. Like, you don't need more than 30 grams of protein post-workout to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And if you had something pre-workout, you don't even need 30 grams of protein. Like, the research have shown that the optimal timing basically for food is between 4 to 6 hours. Just make sure you're eating like every 4 hours. So if you have eaten 2 hours, let's say pre-workout, and 1 hour later you're having your post-workout, you don't have to have your post-workout immediately afterwards, because you still have amino acids in your system. But for me, I just like to be safe, get that protein and carbohydrates into your system, get that recovery process going on. So why delay that recovery process?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you're not depriving yourself, right? It feels good to have some food post-workout, right? It's like, so, yeah, people start arguing about, like, is it important? To me, it's just like, it's so nothing better than having a good workout and then having a liter of milk right afterwards with some fruit, maybe. I mean, it's awesome, right? I mean, why not?
Yeah. There's no benefit to not having that food.
Yeah, exactly. That's because there's those people, the Poindexter kind of people that are very finicky about their research studies and all that stuff. They'll start arguing with you. Well, there's no reason, the 30-minute anabolic window, it's bullshit. And I just say, I just like to have some food after workout. Why not, right? Like you said, it's not like I'm going to make myself worse by having some sort of food within that anabolic window. If it exists or if it doesn't, I don't care. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Well, awesome, brother. Thank you so much for your time, man. I don't know. Do you anything to add? Where can people find you, brother? Where can people reach out to you and find your website and all that? Just let people know. I'll link it also.
Yeah, I'm just mostly active on my website, MinElite. I try to post an article once a week. Then I'm also active on the Rapid forum. My username is just Hans. Then I have a YouTube channel, which I can't remember the name, actually, but I think... So I try to make another video about once a week. Then I'm also trying to be relatively active on Instagram, which is just MinElite or Hans. Like, I can't remember. Like,
don't worry about it. I'll link it all up there. But yeah, from your website, I think you have everything that's linked.
Yeah, exactly. I have all my links.
I'll get it on.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. So it's basically my website, those social media, and the forum where I try to help as many people as possible.
Awesome, man. And thank you so much. It'll be out there. I'll link you up there. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it, man.
It's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. I had a really great time talking to you.
Things you own end up owning you.